All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, the Lincoln Project's Kurt Bardella is out with a new op-ed in USA Today, opining that once Joe Biden is inaugurated, the media should stop covering Trump. Here's the piece. It's titled, "Get Ready to Change the Channel and Stop Giving Donald Trump the Attention He Craves," and has the following self-conscious subhead, "I am a part of this problem, but my point is we have an opportunity to do better." So I guess now that Bardella and Lincoln Project made millions grifting off of anti-Trump resistance porn, he's ready to change the channel. Might be worth noting here that pinned to the top of Bardella's Twitter is a video of him on MSNBC calling Trump a dictator fomenting a coup. Way to not feed into the madness there. On the merits of Bardella's argument, however, I can't actually totally disagree. He basically makes the case that for Trump, all attention is good attention, and that even if the coverage is profoundly negative, you're still kind of playing into his game ultimately. He writes, "Showered with nonstop attention, Trump learned from the news media that the more sensational his rhetoric became, the more he could own the airwaves. Didn't matter what people said about him, just as long as they were talking about him. How many times have we heard political and media observers ask out loud, when will this insanity all stop? The answer is simple. It'll stop when we stop feeding oxygen to this firestorm of our own making." I might add that the insanity will stop when working class people have some modicum of power and basic stability in this nation. Not that Donald Trump was anything but a charlatan where those matters were concerned, but I digress. Now look, I think it's silly to imagine you can ignore the man entirely when he will continue to be one of the most powerful and significant political figures in American life. I've always thought that the instinct to just block his Twitter account and stop airing his pressers was an entirely silly one. But there is no doubt the overwrought, hyperbolic, conspiratorial, anti-Trump programming that is poured forth from MSNBC and CNN all day, every day, it's been a disaster. It's often been wrong, it's been bad for the country, and it hasn't even been effective at turning people off of Trump. Instead, it's actually backfired, serving to harden his support and turn off more working-class voters who are sick of the constant moral preening. But in two very important ways for these networks, it has not been a disaster. Trump all day, every day has, of course, been great for ratings, temporarily rescuing these two networks from the dying relic status that they so richly deserve. Trump as Hitlerian unique evil all day, every day was also a very effective tool for stuffing the left. This type of coverage and the mania that it fueled meant that every even mild critique of any Democrat led to hysterical outrage that you were enabling fascism and that you must love Trump. And it also meant that the sum total ambition of the Democratic Party collapsed down to just defeating Trump. The media was well poised to define the squishy concept of electability for a terrified Democratic base, and these two interrelated projects, making money and neutering the left, were a grand success with the all-Trump, all-the-time strategy. So, how will CNN and MSNBC adjust to the post-Trump era? They won't. I see absolutely no reason to believe that they plan to change their programming direction one iota. And Trump, floating a 2024 run, of course, gives them every reason they need to just continue on this same tired path, using the unique threat of Trump to coerce silence from the left and to gloss over the terrible politics of the new MSNBC Never Trump Republican stars and to make their audience feel like the future of the country depends on them watching tonight's episode of Rachel Maddow. To the extent that they even cover what will surely be one of the more interesting dynamics of the Biden era, the division between the establishment and anti-establishment wings of the party, it will be always to carry water for the team, as you know. You can imagine plenty of Nicole Wallace and Joe Scarborough trashing the squad sessions and any and all progressive priorities. So, will all of that work to keep ratings sky high? Probably not all that well, actually. They're fighting against three things as far as I can see it. First of all, they're lacking the grand, dramatic conspiracy of Russiagate to keep viewers transfixed and tune in for every breaking detail. The Trump outrage of the day can get you some juice, but it's not nearly as much of a ratings bonanza as the transfixing international spy drama that was Russiagate. Second, and very simply, Trump out of power is just not as exciting as Trump in power, even if he is threatening to return again. Couple that with the fact that Joe Biden has a lot of times resisted really pouring fuel on the fire of Trump outrage, and it seems to me it's going to be kind of a tough task to maintain the ardor of the anti-Trump flame at quite as incendiary of levels. Finally, MSNBC has cultivated an audience and fed a movement that sole ambition was just to get Trump out of office and go back to brunch. An audience that just wants to be able to ignore politics again. So no one should be shocked when they treat the upcoming era as sleepy time with Joe Biden. That's what was promised. That's what they expect. That was the primary driver and motivation of the political energy expended by this group over the past 4 years. And if history is any guide, The left will meekly accept the framing of Donald Trump as unique evil and allow themselves to be incapacitated once again. Because they seem still today to not realize how much that Trump as literal Hitler narrative has been weaponized against them. And once you consent to this narrative, then how can you possibly do anything but fight against this modern-day genocidal maniac? An agenda of universal economic rights and working-class power will melt before the urgent need to resist the descent into fascism. It's ultimately just another ploy to protect neoliberalism at all costs. Now, that's not to say, of course, that we shouldn't tell the truth, which is oftentimes awful, about Donald Trump. You must. But feeding into the media and the hyperbolic, fact-free conspiracy mongering has only served to solidify the power grip of neoliberalism and entrench Trumpism itself for the long term. Fantastic state of affairs for the wealthy and the powerful to lock this hellish reality into place for another few years. And Sagar, I'm sure you also saw there's some breaking news out of MSNBC.
Yes.
Longtime head Phil Griffin, who was my boss when I was there, he's been pushed down apparently. Rashida Jones, who's been one of his top aides for many years, will take that slot. Now, as far as I know, I don't think ideologically or in terms of their programming direction, they're particularly that much different. So I don't think that changes the fact that, look, what's been good for them is Trump all day, every day. He's going to be around enough for them to continue to justify that. Serves their interest in terms of the bottom line, serves their interest in terms of neutering the left. So there you go.
Yeah, and, a friend Joe Weisenthal just tweeted this observation this morning. CNN is airing a clip of Lou Dobbs berating Stephen Miller. Makes me suspect that even after he leaves office, the networks will not be able to drop their love of Trump or Trump world content. Of
course not.
And that's the truth, which is that Biden's boring, okay? Like, talking about Lloyd Austin, his next reported defense secretary pick, who is a tool of Raytheon and hedge funds and civil-military relations, that's boring. Having Lou Dobbs shout at Stephen Miller, that's exciting. And people are like, see, chaos in Trump world and all this stuff. What's Trump going to do next? What was his latest tweet? It's never going to end for these people. And look, their programming is actually bad when you strip Trump off of it. If you take Trump out, do you want to watch any of this nonsense? Yeah, they need to go back to covering Malaysian, MH370, because that's all it actually did it for in the past.
Pretty good on that front.
Oh, they were great on that front. Don Lemon, he's like, the plane missed. Did he fall asleep? Did he come in? Anyway, I actually got really into that. But look, it's riveting. It's riveting. But they don't have that anymore. And so they have to create it. And what they're going to do is lean back on the person who saved their business, which was Trump. There's just no question that he came along. I think Hillary would have been a disaster for them. Trump gave them at least a 10-year shot in the arm, re-addicting a generation of Gen X and boomers back to their televisions who had slowly been tuning out for a long time. They cannot let him go. And you're looking at the weekend lineup, like Jonathan Capehart and Tiffany. And I'm like, nobody would watch this if it wasn't for outrage. No one. It's terrible. It's actually so bad. Same with most of their prime time. What are they going to do? What is Chris Hayes going to rant and cry about whenever Trump is gone?
And it is funny because they were really rescued by Trump. I mean, I remember back to when I was there, which was like during the, second end of the first Obama term and during the second Obama term. And there was this real sense of this network is adrift, bleeding viewers. This is Obama's great and Republicans are terrible all day, every day. It was like people are like, okay, we get it. We're bored. We're moving on. And so there was this real sort of sense of reckoning that was coming of, oh, my God, the media landscape is shifting. You've got all these cord cutters. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then Trump came in and all of that searching, self-searching just ended because then business was great again as usual. And so they didn't have to do anything. And it's such an easy and lazy story. So I think you're right that the easy outrage is obviously the Trump show and all of that. Obviously on this show, we think that things like Lloyd Austin being nominated are really interesting.
That's important.
Because they're important and they're interesting because we actually care about what that represents and what that means and the values and the policies and the principles that entails. But if you have conditioned your viewers that none of that actually matters, that the only thing that matters is the Democratic good guys versus the Republican bad guys, then that's not going to be interesting to you because you haven't explained or laid out for your audience why that matters and why that's important and why that should be interesting and why you should be paying attention to that. So, the easy thing for them to do will be to continue the same old playbook. I just don't think it's going to be as successful in this term.
The apocalypse is coming.
Because ultimately, look, I mean, he's not the president anymore. They don't have Russiagate anymore. And so they've promised their audience that they can all go back to brunch once Joe Biden is elected. And so I don't think anybody should be surprised when that's exactly what they do.
What's even worse, I think, is that the audience that they've retained are now not susceptible to a real conversation around Lloyd Austin, right? They're not susceptible. So if you were to have a Lloyd Austin expose on whichever one of these shows, and Chris Hayes, for example, if he were to do an entire segment about the military-industrial complex and Raytheon and connections to this hedge fund, his audience would get pissed.
His audience would revolt.
They would revolt. They say, why are you going after Joe Biden? It's not possible for them.
Yeah.
I mean, here, half the audience is pissed off any other day. That's a good thing. That's right. Half will be here today, half the other day. It's all good. It's like, and they don't have that luxury. So.
No, they don't, because they've made this so simplistic and they've so carried the narrative of like any criticism of Democrats is helping fascism. Mm-hmm. If you criticize Democrats at all, then you yourself are uniquely evil. And so that's the box that they've put themselves into.
Well, good luck, folks.
Next on Rising, Democratic strategist Jennifer Holdsworth and Senior Director of Policy with the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. They're going to be here for Team Rising when we return.